I never thought I'd die on a hard, filthy plastic chair next to a closed gas station on Interstate 10. But that's exactly where I was sitting on a sweltering August afternoon in New Mexico. The dry air burned my throat, but not as much as the cold dread that ran down my spine when I stared out at the empty parking lot. My son Ethan's silver Ford Expedition was completely gone. With it went the suitcase containing my heart medication and my return flight ticket. Only 5 minutes earlier we had been arguing. Ethan, my son, had delivered the fatal blow in a cold, unfamiliar voice. "You chose money over family, Arthur. Now you have time to think about your priorities." Serena. My daughter-in-law hadn't even bothered to look back. They abandoned their 65-year-old father at a desolate rest stop, all because I refused to forgive the $80,000 loan I had given them to save their home. They thought they had won. They thought I was just a helpless old man they could discard. But there was one thing they didn't know as they drove away. I was the man who still held the legal lien deed to the $500,000 house Ethan and Serena thought they fully owned, and I was about to sell it right out from under them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. My name is Arthur. I am 65 years old, 5 years into widowerhood, living comfortably in a small, secure community in Boca Raton, Florida. My life was simple daily walks, bridge club, and managing the retirement fund I'd built from 30 years as a corporate investment consultant. My late wife Evelyn had often called me cautious, meticulous, even stubborn. Now sitting alone in that dust-choked desert, I thanked God for the stubbornness. It all started 6 months earlier. The call came late one evening in February. The caller ID showed Ethan. I answered cheerfully, expecting news about my grandkids Chloe, 12, and Liam, 8. Instead, I heard panic. "Dad, we're in trouble." Ethan stammered, his voice thick with fear. "Serena lost her job months ago, and we've been trying to keep it quiet. But with the mortgage and the kids' tuition, we're 45 days from foreclosure. We're going to lose the house." My heart immediately clenched, not for Ethan, but for Chloe and Liam. I had missed too much of their childhood living across the country. The thought of those sweet kids losing the only home they'd ever known, losing their stability, it broke me. How much, I asked immediately, running numbers in my head. Evelyn's life insurance policy was supposed to be my cushion, the emergency fund I would never touch. $80,000, he whispered. "It'll cover the missed payments and clear the high-interest credit cards we used just to tread water." "Dad, I hate asking you, but you're the only one who can save us. The kids would be devastated." I knew I couldn't say no. Family comes first, right? That's what Evelyn always taught me. Within a week, I liquidated a portion of my savings. But I wasn't naive. 30 years in finance teaches you one thing: never invest without collateral, even if it's family. I flew to Dallas ostensibly for a visit with the grandkids, but really to handle the transaction. I met with my longtime lawyer, Linda, who drafted a simple, ironclad agreement. The $80,000 was a 2-year loan at a minimal interest rate. And here was my insurance policy, the leverage I needed. I would hold a legal lien on their home until the full amount was repaid. If they defaulted on the repayment terms, I had the immediate right to call in the loan, forcing the house's sale to recover my principal. Ethan and Serena seemed mildly offended when I presented the paperwork at their dining room table. "Dad, really? A contract?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "It's just standard procedure, son," I said, keeping my voice firm but reassuring. "It protects both of us. It ensures this is a loan, not a handout. It's what I taught you about business." They signed. They didn't read the fine print about the lien, or perhaps they did, and simply dismissed the possibility that I, their gentle old father, would ever actually use it. "You're a lifesaver, Dad," Ethan said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a quick transaction than an embrace. "We'll have this paid back the second Serena finds work." I flew back to Florida feeling like a hero. This was my sacrifice, my financial rescue. I truly believed I was bridging a temporary rough patch for my family. I had no idea it was the first step toward the most humiliating betrayal of my entire life. For the first few months, things were good. Ethan called every Sunday full of updates. Chloe was excelling in her digital art classes. Liam had joined the youth soccer league. They sent photos of family dinners. I felt proud that my money had restored their happiness. Then the calls started getting shorter. Ethan sounded distracted, always rushing off to a meeting or the kids' activity. Serena was never available to talk. When I visited their social media, I started noticing discrepancies. Serena, who was supposedly spending her days job hunting, was posting pictures of expensive designer dinners and what appeared to be a lavish renovation of their kitchen. Most damningly, I saw a shiny new Ford F-150 King Ranch parked in their driveway, replacing the 10-year-old sedan Ethan drove, a truck that cost well over $60,000. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Is everything all right, son?" I asked during one particularly brief conversation in May. "I saw the new truck in the driveway. That seems like a big purchase considering you're still recovering." Ethan's voice immediately turned defensive. "Everything's fine, Dad. That was a necessary purchase. My old sedan was failing and I need reliable transport for work and hauling the kids' gear. We got a great deal. Look, I really gotta run. I'm late for a client meeting. Talk next week." He hung up before I could press him. I pushed the doubt down. Maybe they were truly back on their feet. Maybe they just had bad priorities. Surely my son wouldn't lie to me about something so fundamental. I pushed the doubt down. Maybe they were truly back on their feet. Maybe they just had bad priorities. Surely my son wouldn't lie to me about something so fundamental. But the distancing continued. When I suggested flying up for Liam's 8th birthday in April, Ethan hesitated. "Actually, Dad, it's not a good time. Serena's parents are visiting and the house is cramped. You know how it is. We'll celebrate when things settle down." Things never seemed to settle down. I suggested visiting for Chloe's art exhibition in June. Another excuse followed. Serena's sister was staying. Ethan was traveling for a big business trip. The kids had too much homework. Every conversation felt like a performance scripted to keep me satisfied, yet at arm's length. I started feeling less like a respected father and more like an ATM they had to manage. The realization of the truth didn't come from Ethan, but from Chloe. One afternoon in late May, I called Ethan and my granddaughter accidentally answered his phone. "Grandpa Arthur," she exclaimed, her voice flooding with genuine excitement. "I miss you so much. Why does Daddy keep saying you're too busy to visit? I want to show you my room. We painted it blue." My heart, the one that required medication, clenched painfully. Too busy, I hadn't been told about the room painting, let alone any request from her to see me. Before I could respond, I heard Ethan's panicked whisper in the background. "Chloe, give me the phone now." "Hi, Dad," Ethan said, slightly breathless as he took the phone. "Sorry about that." Chloe grabbed my phone while I was making coffee. "Ethan," I said, my voice carefully controlled, pushing down the tremor in my chest. "Chloe seems to think I've been too busy to visit. What exactly have you been telling my grandchildren?" There was a long, terrible silence on the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, formulating a plausible lie. "Mom, it's just kids," he finally managed, sounding annoyed rather than apologetic. "They mix things up. Look, I'm actually late for an important meeting. Can I call you back tonight?" He never called back that day or the next. When I finally reached him 3 days later, he was polite, distant, and offered another 5-minute update on his job, skirting past any mention of Chloe or the visit. That's when the methodical side of me took over. The former investment advisor who never trusted a balance sheet without seeing the documentation. I decided to make an unannounced quick visit. If I wasn't welcome for an extended stay, perhaps a surprise drop-in would force their hand and expose the truth. I booked a flight to Dallas for the following weekend. The drive from the rental car agency to their suburban neighborhood in Thornfield was filled with nervous anticipation. I kept rehearsing possible scenarios. Maybe Serena had found a high-paying job and they were simply embarrassed they hadn't told me they were back on their feet. Maybe the renovation was a small, necessary repair. I was desperately trying to cling to the image of the honest, hard-working son I thought I had raised. When I pulled into their immaculate driveway that Saturday afternoon, my generous assumptions shattered like glass. The house looked nothing like the struggling family home Ethan had described. The lawn was professionally manicured. The new Ford F-150 was there, but next to it sat a sleek black Tesla Model 3, a far cry from the financial desperation that had supposedly driven them to borrow $80,000 from their father's retirement fund. Through the large bay window, I could see an open-concept kitchen gleaming with stainless steel appliances and expensive granite countertops. This wasn't a family recovering from unemployment. This was a family upgrading their lifestyle. My initial nod of doubt hardened into a cold, sick weight in my stomach. I rang the doorbell. I heard Serena's voice from inside, cheerful and relaxed. "Ethan, Can you get that? I'm busy setting out the appetizers for the party tonight. Dinner party? They were entertaining guests while supposedly still juggling debt and recovering from months of unemployment. Ethan opened the door. The color drained from his face when he saw me, turning his complexion the pale white of raw chicken breast. Dad. What are you doing here? He stammered, his eyes darting nervously toward the kitchen. Surprising my son and grandchildren, I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the crushing weight of realization. May I come in? He reluctantly stepped aside. As I walked into the foyer, I saw Serena in the kitchen through the archway, placing an elaborate charcuterie board onto a newly polished walnut table. She looked up, saw me, and her polite hostess smile instantly dissolved into a mask of forced discomfort. Arthur, what a surprise, she managed, wiping her hands on a hand towel that looked expensive enough to be a decorative napkin. We weren't expecting anyone. I wanted to see the grandkids, I stated, looking around the beautifully appointed living room, noting the expensive art pieces and the massive flat-screen television. And catch up with all of you. It's been too long. The kids are at birthday parties. Ethan lied quickly. Too quickly. Both of them. Different parties. They'll be sorry they missed you. Serena chimed in with a practiced smoothness. Yes, Chloe is at her friend Maya's house and Liam is at a teammate's party. You know how busy their social calendars are. Something felt terribly wrong, not just their demeanor, but the too convenient absence of the children. It felt staged. Well, I can wait, I said, sinking into one of their plush new armchairs. I don't have anywhere else to be. We can catch up later tonight. Ethan and Serena exchanged a quick, panicked glance, a glance they thought I missed. Ethan cleared his throat. Actually, Dad, we have dinner plans tonight. Friends coming over. It's been planned for weeks. The dinner party Serena mentioned. Every suggestion I made, visiting the next day, going for ice cream, was met with another conflict, another excuse. After an hour of increasingly awkward conversation, it became brutally clear that I was not welcome in the home I had helped save. I was an inconvenient truth they needed to manage and dismiss. Driving away in my rental car, my hands gripping the wheel, I felt physically ill. This wasn't a struggling family. This was a family that had used my money, my retirement security, to maintain and significantly upgrade their lifestyle while simultaneously shutting me out. I couldn't just leave. My financial instinct kicked in. I decided to extend my trip by a few days. I needed to investigate. I deserved to know the truth about my $80,000 investment. What I discovered over the next 3 days changed everything. A quick search of public records confirmed my worst fears. Serena had indeed found a job 4 months ago at a high-end marketing firm, earning a salary significantly higher than her previous position. The Tesla. It was purchased 2 months ago, financed with a large down payment that coincidentally matched a good portion of the money I had loaned them. But the real heartbreaking kick to the gut came on Sunday. I drove past their neighborhood just to clear my mind, and I saw Chloe and Liam playing on the lawn. Not at the birthday parties or activities that had supposedly made them unavailable. They were right there, laughing completely carefree on the lawn of the house I'd helped save. I sat in my rental car at the end of their street, watching my grandchildren and finally processing the undeniable fact. My own son had lied directly to my face, not to protect me, but simply to avoid spending time with me, his father. That evening from my hotel room, I called Ethan. The gloves were off. I need to know the truth, son, I said without preamble. Is Serena working? There was a long, hostile pause. Dad, what is this about? His tone was immediately defensive, devoid of affection. It's about the fact that I lent you $80,000 under the impression you were financially desperate. And now I discover that you've bought 2 new luxury vehicles, renovated your kitchen, and you're throwing dinner parties, all while lying to me about your financial status. You've been treating me like an inconvenient nuisance. We never said we weren't going to pay you back, he retorted, his voice rising in anger. Just because we found some work doesn't mean we're instantly rich. We're still catching up. We don't like your tone, Dad. We're grateful for your help, but that doesn't give you the right to monitor our spending or question our decisions. The conversation quickly deteriorated from there. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking not from fear, but from a cold, focused fury. I was no longer a father to Ethan. I was simply a creditor to be managed, and if possible, avoided entirely. The filial relationship was dead. Lying in the hotel bed that night, I made a decision that would ultimately save my dignity, my financial future, and my relationship with my grandchildren. The investment advisor in me took control. I would call my lawyer Linda first thing in the morning. The next morning back in Florida, I called Linda Walsh, my lawyer. She reviewed the loan agreement. "Arthur," she stated, her voice brisk and professional, "the document is sound. You hold a valid recorded lien on their property. If they default on the repayment terms or if you deem the collateral at risk, which lying about your financial status certainly implies, you have the immediate right to call in the loan. They must repay the full $80,000 within 30 days of formal demand." "And if they don't?" I asked, my voice calm, the fury now a cold, determined focus. "Then we proceed to foreclosure and force the sale of the house to recover your money." I thanked her, told her to draft the demand letter but to hold off on sending it. I still harbored one last foolish hope, perhaps Ethan would realize his mistake and try to fix this like a man. My hope was crushed 2 weeks later, not by an apology, but by an even more insidious form of manipulation. Ethan called, his voice oozing with false warmth, the same tone he used as a teenager when he wanted to borrow my classic Corvette. "Dad, we've been talking," he began. "Serena and I think it would be fantastic if you moved in with us." My heart did a silly little skip. Could this be it? A genuine invitation back into their lives? Really? "That sounds wonderful, Ethan. I've been hoping to be closer to Chloe and Liam." "Yeah." And the best part is, he continued, his tone turning transactional. "You could cancel your lease in Boca. Think of how much rent you'd save, plus with Serena's new job and the kids' busy schedules, we'd love an extra pair of hands. You could help with school pickups, run errands, and you're such a great cook. It would be like having a living, helping grandparent right there." The genuine enthusiasm in my voice died instantly. An extra pair of hands, a living grandparent. They weren't inviting me to share their life. They were recruiting a free live-in housekeeper and childcare provider. "What about the loan, Ethan?" I asked, my voice flat. He laughed, a practiced hollow sound. "Oh well, that's the other great part. If you're living here and saving all that money on your rent, you probably wouldn't need us to pay back the loan right away, right? You'd be saving so much, Dad." There it was. They wanted me to forgive the $80,000 debt in exchange for the privilege of becoming their unpaid domestic servant, surrendering my independence, my home, and my dignity. My hands started to tremble. I remembered sitting in my comfortable apartment in Florida, looking at Evelyn's photos and my books. I realized I would rather live alone and independently than be taken for granted by people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient, inexhaustible resource. "Let me think about it," I said. "Sure, but don't take too long." Serena's already excited about having help for the kids' summer schedule. I called him back the next day. "Ethan, I've decided not to move in. I like my life here." His voice immediately took on a cold, manipulative edge I hadn't heard since he was a spoiled teenager. "That's pretty selfish, Dad. We're offering you a chance to be close to your grandchildren, and you're choosing your bridge club over family." "I'm choosing self-respect over being used," I corrected him. "Used? We are family. Family helps each other." "You're right," I said. "Family helps each other, which is why I expect the loan to be repaid according to our agreement." The silence that followed was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with pure contempt. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, we'll pay back your precious money. But don't expect us to pretend we're not completely disgusted by your priorities." That was the end of May. June and July came and went with no payment, no communication, and only vague, dismissive responses when I inquired. They never intended to pay me back. They just hoped I'd forget or die before collecting. I told Linda to prepare the demand letter. I was done waiting. Just as Linda was preparing the paperwork, Ethan called with what he clearly thought was an olive branch, a final deceptive attempt at manipulation. "Dad, we're planning a family road trip for Labor Day weekend, Colorado Springs, maybe some hiking. We thought you might like to join us," he offered cheerfully. I was surprised, and I'll admit, a flicker of hope returned. Maybe the money issue was just stress, and they truly wanted to reconnect. I accepted. I arrived in Dallas, packed my suitcase with my heart medication, and bought small gifts for Chloe and Liam. The first few hours of the drive were pleasant. We chatted about the kids, but the forced friendliness soon evaporated. We stopped for lunch at a family restaurant in a small town. Once Chloe and Liam were outside playing, Ethan and Serena cornered me. "Dad, about the loan," Ethan said, leaning in. "We need to talk about reality. Asking us to repay $80,000 right now would put us right back where we started. We have the new mortgage payments, the kids' activities, the savings we need to build back up. But you agreed to the terms, I said quietly. That was when we were desperate. Serena interjected, her smile gone, replaced by hostility. You don't really need that money, Arthur. You have your pension, your insurance. We are just starting out. I stared at them. My 40-year-old son, who owned 2 luxury cars, talking about just starting out, while demanding I, a 65-year-old on a fixed income, write off a massive debt. The agreement we signed says, "Forget the paperwork for a minute, Dad. We're talking about family here," Ethan interrupted, resorting to the ultimate emotional weapon. Is money truly more important to you than your relationship with your son and grandchildren? I felt like I'd been slapped. You're saying if I expect you to honor your legal commitment, I'm choosing money over family. We're saying that if you insist on treating us like debtors instead of family, it's going to damage our relationship. The kids are already picking up on the tension, Serena threatened, glancing out the window at Chloe and Liam playing happily, completely oblivious. The children don't know anything about this. They know you've been distant, Ethan countered. They know you turned down our offer to move in. They're starting to think Grandpa Arthur doesn't want to spend time with them. The blatant manipulation using my love for Chloe and Liam as a weapon took my breath away. I stood up, unable to breathe. I think we should head back to the car. The rest of the drive was tense, silent fury. Then we reached the remote rest stop on Interstate 10 in New Mexico. Ethan announced it was an amazing viewpoint. It was anything but, just a few picnic tables, vending machines, and a closed visitor center. Kids, go explore, but stay where we can see you, Serena called out as Chloe and Liam ran off toward the picnic area. I was distracted taking a photo of the mountains with my phone, trying to calm my racing heart. That's when I heard the sound of car doors slamming. I turned around. Ethan was already starting the engine. Serena was in the passenger seat. Through the windshield, I could see the confused faces of Chloe and Liam in the back. "What are you doing?" I shouted, rushing toward the SUV. Ethan rolled down his window, his face a mask of cold resolve. "Dad, this isn't working out. The kids are uncomfortable with the tension, and frankly, so are we." "What are you talking about, Ethan? Get out of the car." "We think it's better if you find your own way back to Florida," Serena said, her voice entirely devoid of remorse. "This will give you some perspective on what family truly means. You're leaving me here, in the middle of nowhere. There's a gas station up the road. Someone will come along." Ethan shrugged, his eyes dead. "You made your choice when you chose money over family. Now you can live with the consequences." "Daddy, why are we leaving Grandpa Arthur?" I heard Chloe cry, pressing her tear-stained face against the window. "We'll explain later, sweetheart," Serena snapped. Ethan put the car in drive. I watched, screaming their names, my heart threatening to burst in my chest, as my son drove away, taking my grandchildren with him. My suitcase, my medication, my return ticket, everything disappeared down the mountain highway. I stood there for long minutes, unable to move. I was 65, stranded, terrified, and betrayed by my own blood. When the shock wore off, the immediate reality hit me. I was alone, miles from civilization, with limited service and a very real medical risk. I stumbled into the small, dusty gas station. I bought a cup of stale coffee with shaking hands. I sat down and pulled out my phone. And that's when the raw hurt turned into icy rage. I opened my bank app to check my card balance. I immediately saw 2 recent charges I hadn't made: a $450 charge at an electronics store and a $350 charge at a high-end steakhouse in Dallas. Both charges were made while I was sitting stranded and abandoned in this gas station. Ethan and Serena hadn't just left me. They had immediately started stealing from me using my credit card information from previous purchases. This wasn't just familial cruelty. This was calculated criminal fraud. The victim was dead. The fighter was born. The moment I saw those fraudulent charges on my card, the fear was instantly replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They had abandoned me to steal from me. They had forfeited any claim to my mercy or to my family name. First, I dealt with the immediate crisis. The young man working the counter, named Javier, noticed me sitting there looking pale and furious for over an hour. He approached with genuine concern, a kindness that shamed my own son's actions. "Sir, are you okay? You look like you need help. My family left me here," I stated simply, pushing back the tears. "I need to figure out how to get back to Florida." Javier, bless his soul, became my guardian angel. He let me use the station's landline as my 1 bar of service was useless. My first call was to my younger brother George, who owned a successful logistics company near Atlanta, Georgia. When George answered, his usual jovial tone vanished immediately upon hearing my voice. "Arthur, you sound terrible. What happened? Where are you?" I recounted the entire saga, the loan, the lies, the insulting offer, and finally the calculated cruelty of the highway abandonment. The silence on George's end was terrifyingly long. "George, are you still there?" "I'm here," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I'm processing the fact that my nephew abandoned his 65-year-old father on a mountain highway. Ruthless. Utterly ruthless. George, you don't have to. The hell I don't. Text me the address of that gas station, Arthur. I'll be there in 3 hours. Don't move. I'm coming to get you." While I waited, Javier brought me water and coffee. I immediately called my bank, reporting the fraudulent charges and canceling the card. The audacity of it, stealing $800 while I was stranded, showed a level of moral bankruptcy that even the most cynical part of my former profession couldn't have imagined. When George finally pulled up in his heavy-duty pickup truck, he took one look at my exhausted, dusty face and the solitary chair I occupied and pulled me into a fierce, bear-like hug. "Those bastards," George growled, his face set in a grim mask. George was 5 years younger, a big man with a practical mind. He had always been the defender in the family. "Arthur, I've always disliked that boy's entitlement, but this is beyond the pale." We drove through the night toward Georgia. I was quiet, staring out at the passing landscape. I was processing the end of a relationship I had cherished and the crushing realization that my son was not merely selfish or financially irresponsible, he was dangerous. "What are you going to do?" George asked, finally breaking the silence as the sun began to rise over Texas. "I have legal options," I said slowly, clutching the paper detailing the fraudulent charges. "Linda said I could force the sale of the house if they default on the loan." George glanced at me, his eyes sharp and serious. "Do it, Arthur. Don't hesitate. I watched you enable Evelyn's poor financial decisions for 20 years. I watched you give Ethan a down payment for his wedding, for his first car, for this house. When is enough enough? They used your vulnerability and they used your heart medication as a weapon. You owe them nothing." He was right. Evelyn, bless her kind soul, had always been the dreamer, and I had always been the cleanup crew, sacrificing my security for others' comfort. When she died, I thought I was finally free. But Ethan, my only son, had drawn me right back into the cycle. They used my credit card while I was stranded, George. I confessed, the shame and fury tightening my throat. They spent $800 knowing I was sitting there with no way home. George's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Those absolute pieces of... "Arthur, you promise me you call Linda first thing tomorrow. You fight back. Not for the money, but for your dignity." "I will," I vowed. And I meant it. I didn't fly back to Florida immediately. George insisted I stay at his place in Atlanta to stabilize emotionally and medically. The next morning from George's kitchen, I called Linda. "Linda, it's Arthur. I want you to call in the loan today. Immediate repayment in 30 days. Linda was quiet for a long moment. "Arthur, are you sure?" "Once we file this demand, there is no turning back. We will be forcing the sale of your son's home." I told her everything: the highway abandonment, the credit card fraud, and Ethan's manipulative phone calls. "Arthur," Linda said, her voice now hard and professional. "I've practiced law for 30 years. This isn't just civil default. This is financial elder abuse and potential reckless endangerment. We need to document everything and consider filing a police report for the credit card fraud. I just want my money back and to be left alone, Linda." Start with the demand letter. The demand letter was delivered to Ethan and Serena's Dallas home on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone began ringing incessantly. It was Ethan leaving a string of increasingly frantic voicemails, the false warmth replaced by panicked aggression. "Dad, we need to talk about this lawyer letter. There's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Mom, please call me back. We can work this out without involving lawyers." "You're being ridiculous, Dad. If you don't call me back tonight, I'm driving to Georgia to sort this out in person. You are overstepping." I didn't answer. I deleted the messages. Wednesday morning, the call came from Serena. She was screaming. "Arthur, this is Serena. You have to stop this. We can't possibly come up with $80,000 in 30 days. The kids are settled. Chloe is doing so well in her art classes. Liam made the travel soccer team. You can't seriously be considering destroying their stability over money." There it was again, the emotional weapon. They were using my grandchildren as a shield for their fraud. "You should have thought about their stability before you abandoned their grandmother on a highway and stole from my credit card." I retorted, the iciness of my tone shocking even myself. "We're begging you, Arthur. Give us 6 months. We'll pay back with interest." "You had 8 months, Serena. You bought a new Tesla instead of making payments. The answer is no, 30 days. Serena's voice suddenly turned cold, dripping with malice. "Fine. You want to play hardball? We can play hardball too. Don't think the kids won't know exactly why they had to leave their home and their friends. Don't think they won't know that their grandfather chose money over their happiness." She hung up, leaving me shaking with a mixture of rage and sickening realization they were willing to poison my grandchildren's hearts against me. They had declared war. That same evening, the first signs of their counterattack appeared. My neighbor in Florida called. "Arthur, honey, are you all right? There was a man here asking questions about you. Said he was your son. Wanted to know if you were mentally competent. Asked if I'd noticed any signs of dementia or confusion lately. He seemed very concerned about your welfare." My blood ran cold. Ethan was laying the groundwork to challenge my mental competency. He wanted to claim I was confused or manipulated when I signed the lien, hoping to invalidate the entire contract. The battlefield was no longer just about the money. It was about my reputation, my dignity, and my sanity, and my access to Chloe and Liam. I immediately underwent a cognitive evaluation as Linda and George insisted. 4 hours of testing confirmed I was functioning at the high end of normal for my age. Armed with this proof of my mental clarity, I felt ready to face their dirty games. However, I was unprepared for their next move, the ultimate betrayal. A few days later, a social worker from the Colorado Child Protective Services, CPS, called me. They had received a report alleging that I, Arthur, had become agitated during a family discussion about financial matters and walked away from the vehicle, leaving the children alone and frightened while their parents searched for me. Ethan and Serena had reported me to CPS, claiming I had abandoned the children, not the other way around. They were trying to paint me as an unstable, unfit grandfather to cut off access to Chloe and Liam permanently. This was the tipping point. They had weaponized my love for my grandchildren. The betrayal was complete. I hired a private investigator, David Miriam, a former detective specializing in financial fraud. My instructions were simple. Find out where all the $80,000 went and find out if this is a pattern. David called me within 48 hours. His voice was grim. "Arthur, I need to be direct. Your son and daughter-in-law haven't just been lying. They are running what amounts to a sophisticated financial fraud operation, and you are not their only victim." My jaw dropped. "What are you talking about?" David presented the evidence. 1. The lie. Serena never lost her job. She got a significant promotion 3 months before they contacted me for the loan. 2. The truth. The $80,000 went not to mortgage payments but to covering massive debts accrued by Ethan due to a 2-year sports gambling addiction costing them over $150,000. The house was never at risk of foreclosure. Their credit cards were maxed out. 3. The pattern. 2 years prior, they borrowed $25,000 from Serena's elderly parents under the pretense of medical expenses for Liam. The money disappeared into Ethan's gambling. When Serena's parents started asking questions, Ethan and Serena cut off all contact, preventing them from seeing Chloe and Liam for over a year. They have a pattern of financially exploiting elderly family members and then discarding them when they become inconvenient, David concluded. Then came the final devastating blow. David showed me printed screenshots from Serena's supposedly private social media accounts, posts where she was bragging about the renovations, the Tesla, and luxury dinners. The captions were pure malice. One post showing their newly renovated kitchen read, "Kitchen renovation complete when family loans you money but you never have to pay it back. Some people are so gullible. Hashtag free upgrade and hashtag sucker born." I felt like I was going to vomit. They called me a sucker. The thudding pain in my chest was immediate. I wasn't just wronged, I was mocked. The deep, agonizing hurt fueled a cold, hard resolve. I immediately called George and Linda. "We turn this over to the police," I stated. "This is organized crime. The false CPS report is a felony. I want charges for fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse." Then the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, along with the FBI, took the case immediately. Detective Sarah Rodriguez called the case one of the most comprehensive financial elder abuse cases she had ever seen. The arrest warrants for Ethan and Serena were secured quickly. However, the investigation revealed something far larger. Ethan and Serena were part of an organized criminal network that targeted elderly individuals across multiple states. They reported to a higher-up, a man known only as Mr. Cross. The FBI proposed a dangerous plan, a sting operation. Mr. Cross wants to know why the Dallas operation went sideways, Agent Jennifer Chen explained. We will have you meet with him under the pretense that you want to resolve this quietly and pay money to prevent Ethan and Serena from going to prison. We need you to wear a wire and get him to incriminate himself and reveal the network's structure. And I thought of Chloe and Liam, who were now caught in the middle of their parents' criminal activity. I thought of Serena's parents cut off and robbed. I'll do it, I said, for my grandchildren and for all the other grandparents they've targeted. 2 days later, I sat in a secluded hotel conference room wired for audio and video. Mr. Cross, a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed and radiating false sincerity, arrived. He looked like a trusted financial advisor. Mr. Arthur, he said smoothly, I want to start by saying how sorry I am about the overzealousness of our associates Ethan and Serena. We help families resolve financial difficulties discreetly. By stealing from their own parents, I asked, forcing my voice to tremble with despair. Cross smiled, a chilling lack of emotion in his eyes. We prefer to think of it as redistributing family wealth more efficiently. Elderly people often hoard assets they don't truly need while their children struggle. We facilitate a transfer that benefits everyone. We identify elderly individuals with substantial assets and adult children with financial pressures. We call it intervention strategy. He went on to reveal the chilling scope of the operation. They kept 60% of the money stolen for consulting fees, giving the family members only 40% to sustain their lifestyle and ensure their silence. He showed me photos of other victim families claiming he had resolved their situations. So what is the cost for you to make the criminal charges against my son disappear? I asked, playing my part. $200,000, he stated. It's a fair price for keeping your family intact and ensuring no prison time. I pressed him further, getting him to admit that he had suggested the highway abandonment to Ethan as a dramatic demonstration of vulnerability to force compliance. He even threatened to frame me for tax issues if I didn't pay. Sometimes, he concluded, his voice hardening slightly, elderly people need proper encouragement to overcome their natural reluctance to part with money they're not using. The confession was complete. Agent Chen's team swooped in immediately after Cross left. The evidence was overwhelming. My cooperation led to coordinated arrests across 4 states, dismantling the entire Operation Family Trust network with over 14 individuals arrested, including financial advisors and even social workers. The network had stolen over $3.2 million from 200 victims. The final dramatic event occurred 3 days later. Detective Rodriguez called me. Arthur, we executed the warrants this morning. Ethan and Serena Brooks are both in custody in Dallas. They were arrested at the airport. They had the children's passports and plane tickets to Mexico. They were hours away from fleeing the country. My heart stopped. They were going to kidnap Chloe and Liam. The children are safe, she assured me. They're with Dallas CPS. We need to discuss temporary custody. I immediately called my brother George. George, I choked out. They were going to take the kids to Mexico. They need family, real family. I'm already on my way to Dallas. Arthur, George replied firmly. Those kids are my niece and nephew. We will figure this out. Together. The aftermath was exhausting, but restorative. 1. Legal victory. The court proceeded with the house sale. After paying off the remaining mortgage and legal fees, I recovered $127,000 more than the original loan amount. I also received restitution funds from the criminal case. 2. Criminal justice. Ethan pleaded guilty to fraud, money laundering, and elder abuse, receiving a 12-year federal sentence. Serena, having refused the plea deal, was found guilty of additional charges, including filing a false CPS report, and faced a minimum of 25 years. 3. The children. George and I were granted temporary and then permanent joint guardianship of Chloe and Liam. They moved to George's home in Atlanta. I sold my condo in Florida and moved to Atlanta, purchasing a separate in-law suite near George's house. 4. Healing. The children, initially traumatized, entered therapy. I focused on being present, attending Chloe's art shows, cheering at Liam's soccer games, and teaching them that love does not come with conditions or guilt. I used the recovered funds to set up large education trusts for Chloe and Liam, ensuring their future was secure despite their parents' crimes. I became an outspoken advocate against elder abuse. I was 68 years old, and my life was full again, full of purpose, full of love, and full of the noise of my grandchildren. The best revenge wasn't the foreclosure notice. It was seeing Chloe thrive in her art academy and watching Liam score goals, knowing I had given them stability. It was the simple fact that I was there, showing up every day. The last time I spoke to Ethan was through a court transcript. I declined his request for a meeting, knowing it would be another manipulation. In the end, I realized that I had to bury two things: the man Ethan pretended to be, and the idea that I had failed as a father. The process of gaining guardianship was complex but swift, given the criminal charges against Ethan and Serena. George and I worked tirelessly with social services. We provided comprehensive documentation, my clean cognitive evaluation, the overwhelming evidence of the parents' fraud, and our joint commitment to provide a stable, loving environment. 2 weeks after their rescue, I flew to Atlanta to see Chloe and Liam, who were temporarily staying with George. When I walked through the door, Liam, usually reserved, ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Grandpa Arthur, the lady from the government said we might get to live with you and Uncle George." "Is that true?" he whispered into my shirt. "It is true, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And I think that's wonderful." Chloe, ever the contemplative artist, hung back. I knelt down to her level. "Grandpa," she said, her eyes large and sad, "Daddy told us. He told us you walked away at the mountain place because you were mad at us and didn't want to be our grandpa anymore." My heart shattered, then hardened again. They hadn't just used the children. They had deliberately poisoned their minds. "Chloe, listen to me very carefully," I said, holding her hands. "I would never walk away from you or Liam. I love you both more than anything in the world. Your mommy and daddy told a big, terrible lie. They made some very, very bad choices, and they have to face the consequences. You and Liam are the innocent ones here. You did nothing wrong." "Are they bad people?" Liam asked, his voice small. "They made choices that hurt a lot of people, including me and including you." I responded honestly, recalling my therapist's advice to avoid sugarcoating the crime. "But no matter what they chose, you two will always be loved and safe with George and me." This transparency was the foundation of our new family. We enrolled them in trauma therapy immediately. They needed to understand that the manipulation and conditional love they experienced were not normal. The sale of the Dallas house was finalized. I used the recovered money methodically. First, the $127,000 recouped provided a clean slate. Then I leveraged the restitution order from the criminal case to establish significant college savings accounts for both children. I also sent a large check to Serena's elderly parents, who had also been defrauded, finally reaching out to them and offering solidarity as fellow victims. "Arthur," Serena's mother Miriam cried on the phone, "you don't owe us anything. We are the ones who are sorry for our daughter." "Mrs. Miriam," I corrected her gently, "we are all victims of the same criminals. We must look out for each other." Miriam and her husband became new members of my chosen family, sharing our grief and our determination to support the children. I sold my condo in Florida. I realized that my planned retirement, quiet, solitary, focused on hobbies, was empty. What I truly wanted was the chaos, the noise, and the deep emotional involvement of fatherhood version 2.0. George and I found a beautiful property in a family-friendly neighborhood in Atlanta, a main house for George, Chloe, and Liam, and a separate private in-law suite for me. I wanted independence, but I wanted to be close enough to help with homework, drive Liam to soccer practice, and listen to Chloe talk about her art. We closed on the house just before the winter holidays. Moving day was a whirlwind of energy. I watched Chloe and Liam run through their new spacious backyard, the kind of backyard Ethan had always promised but only purchased with stolen money. This time, their joy was built on a foundation of honesty and earned stability. 3 years later, the picture of our life was one of profound peace. Chloe, now 15, was accepted into a prestigious art academy. Liam, 11, was a star player on his travel soccer team, known for his sportsmanship and kindness. They were happy, secure, and knew the difference between true love and manipulation. Ethan was released after serving 8 years of his sentence. He made no attempt to contact us, The distance was mutual and necessary. Serena remains in prison. One evening, sitting with George on our porch watching the fireflies, I reflected on the entire ordeal. Arthur George said, "If I told you 5 years ago that losing $80,000 and having your son go to prison would be the best thing that ever happened to you, what would you say?" I took a slow sip of iced tea. "I would have thought you were insane. I would have thought my life was over when Ethan drove away. But that day, he didn't destroy my life. He destroyed the false narrative I had lived under, the narrative that I had to pay for affection." I learned a lesson at 65 that should have been learned decades earlier. Family is not about blood relations or legal obligations. It's about people who choose to protect, respect, and care for each other. Ethan taught me about betrayal, but George, Chloe, and Liam taught me about salvation. I thought I had given my son the house. I realized he had abandoned me, giving me back my dignity, my grandchildren, and a second chance at life. The comprehensive report from David Merriam and the FBI's ongoing investigation revealed the horrifying scale of the network. Mr. Cross's organization, Family Resource Facilitation, operated by identifying two main vulnerabilities: elderly people with significant liquidity and adult children with unsustainable debt, often fueled by addiction or excessive spending. The children were coached not just on how to lie, but how to use emotional pressure points, like the grandchildren's well-being, to extract money. The evidence was clear. Ethan and Serena had followed a script. The insulting offer to make me their unpaid servant was a common tactic designed to push the grandparent into a rage, providing a pretext for the dramatic abandonment and subsequent filing of the false competency and CPS reports. Arthur, the abandonment wasn't just cruel, Agent Chen told me. It was a core part of their psychological warfare. They wanted you isolated, physically and emotionally distressed, so you'd be desperate to negotiate and pay the $200,000 ransom to fix the criminal charges and get back into your grandchildren's lives. This knowledge was both devastating and liberating. It freed me from the self-doubt that had plagued me since the highway incident. I wasn't a bad father. I was a target of professional con artists, one of whom happened to be my son. The court proceedings moved quickly. Because the case was part of a federal RICO investigation, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, the scope and severity of the charges were immense. I provided testimony about the sting operation with Mr. Cross, detailing his casual admission of running the elder abuse ring. Before the sentencing hearing, I had a lengthy conversation with Miriam and her husband, the Merriam family, Serena's parents. They had read the police reports detailing their daughter's deep involvement, including the social media posts mocking her own mother. "We raised her." Miriam wept over the phone. "We thought we taught her integrity. How did we fail this badly, Arthur?" "You didn't fail Miriam," I assured her. "You were targeted just like me. You raised her with love and she chose greed. That choice belongs to her, not to you. We can't fix them, but we can fix the future for Chloe and Liam." Our shared victimhood forged an immediate bond. They became the first additions to my chosen family, offering mutual support and shared grandparental duties. We started planning visits for Chloe and Liam, ensuring the children knew they had two sets of loving grandparents dedicated to their stability, untainted by the betrayal of their parents. The courtroom for Ethan's sentencing was packed. I chose not to speak, but submitted a written statement that Linda read aloud. "Your Honor, for 65 years, I believed that family was unconditional. Ethan Brooks taught me that I was wrong. Family is not about blood relations or legal obligations. It is about people who choose to protect, respect, and care for each other. Ethan Brooks chose to see me not as his father, but as a target for exploitation. However, his actions also led me to discover what real family looks like. It looks like my brother George, who drove through the night to rescue me. It looks like the kindness of a stranger, Javier, at a desolate gas station. And most importantly, it looks like my grandchildren Chloe and Liam, whose future I am now proud to protect. Ethan Brooks may have destroyed the family I thought I had, but he set me free to build the family I actually needed." Ethan looked pale, broken, and defeated when the judge delivered the sentence: 12 years in federal prison for conspiracy, wire fraud, and elder abuse. Serena, who clung to denial, was convicted and received 25 years. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt no elation, no triumph, only a profound, quiet peace. The anxiety and the gnawing fear that had defined the past year were gone. The legal process had done its work not just in punishing the criminals, but in clarifying my own moral code. The proceeds from the house sale and the restitution funds were managed meticulously. I established the Chloe and Liam Education and Stability Trust, ensuring their future was financially impervious to their parents' past actions. George, with his strong business acumen, oversaw the day-to-day management, while I focused on the emotional and educational development of the children. Moving to Atlanta into my own private suite attached to George's home was the most significant and fulfilling change of my retirement. The quiet routine of Boca Raton was replaced by the joyful chaos of family life. I became Grandpa Arthur, the homework specialist, and the soccer carpool driver. One evening, nearly a year after the arrest, I was reading to Liam while Chloe worked on a painting nearby. "Grandpa Arthur," Liam asked, looking up from his book, "are we expensive?" The question hit me like a physical blow, a direct echo of the toxic environment he had grown up in. "Liam," I said, setting the book down, "children are a privilege, not an expense. You and Chloe bring us joy and purpose. That is priceless. Never, ever let anyone make you feel guilty for existing or for needing support. That is what family is for." Chloe, hearing the conversation, looked up from her canvas. "Aunt Serena told me that families who really love each other give all their money. She said that's why you were selfish." "Chloe, your Aunt Serena was confused about what love means. Real love doesn't come with conditions, guilt, or manipulation attached. Real love is what George and I are giving you now. It's safety, honesty, and support no matter what." It was a profound realization. My fight wasn't just for money. It was a fight to teach my grandchildren the true meaning of integrity and love, shielding them from the conditional, transactional relationships their parents had modeled. 3 years after the abandonment, I stood in the Atlanta Art Academy watching Chloe receive a commendation for her painting titled "The Fireflies and the Chosen Family." The painting depicted George, Liam, Chloe, and me sitting around a campfire, a scene from one of our camping trips with George. There was no trace of Ethan or Serena in the landscape, only light and warmth. I realized that Ethan, in his arrogance, had believed he was punishing me and stealing my future. Instead, he had unknowingly given me the greatest gift, the opportunity to rebuild my life with purpose and surround myself with genuine, unconditional love. I am 68 years old. My heart is strong, my finances are secure, and my house is full of noise and laughter. I am no longer defined by the money I saved or the betrayal I endured. I am defined by the family I built. I thought the greatest mistake of my life was loaning my son that $80,000. I was wrong. The greatest mistake would have been forgiving the debt and allowing the abuse to continue. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to stand up to them, take back what is yours, and teach them that consequences are the ultimate form of respect. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.